our daily lesson. Any questions before we go on? I hope you enjoyed these pictures as much as I enjoyed it watching the process. All right. Learning objectives, of always, you can read them in your own time. And so as we talk about sustainability, it's important to note that there is a movement in the United States currently, as well as other industrialized countries or first world countries you can think of, to have more modern agriculture that's more sustainable in nature, right? And so the main belief is that with this technology-driven, gas or petroleum dependent, specialized production systems that have been made to basically maximize animal production, it has cost many, or it has brought up many costs that actually outweigh the benefits that we're seeing from the systems. And so we see costs associated with that of natural resources and the environment, as well as social costs. And we'll look at these a little more. So some of the external costs to the natural environment would be soil damage. This is a very big one, and it results in erosion, depletion of topsoil, and then contamination. Contamination of the soils as well as the waterways around. We see a loss of soil health. In the soil, to break down various organic, source of organic matter, and for the soil to be healthy, it has a microbial population. We talk about the microbes in the room, and well, there's microbes in the soil as well. And they are required to help maintain a healthy soil that can support life, forages, plants, crops, etc. With a loss of soil health and these intensive systems, we could see a loss of soil tilth, an increase in compaction, and a loss of organic matter. Next, we see habitat loss for native species, as well as loss of species in general. We see depletion in groundwater, pollution from legumes or lagoons, and natural or nitrogen in water wells. And so what's happening, especially if there are high concentrations of animals that are defecating with the feces will have high concentrations of nitrogen or phosphorus. That the nitrogen and phosphorus can actually run off into the waterways and pollute them. What you see, I don't know if any of y'all have studied much into the Gulf of Mexico and the Dead Sea, or the algal blooms that basically appear and make it where natural fish and other aquatic species cannot exist. Some of that can be contributed to non-sustainable production practices. Others can be, and some of that is also contributed to overuse of fertilizers, which is a big problem, and that can happen in agriculture as well as places like residential areas and large golf courses, etc. But the main culprits are the nitrogen and the phosphorus that are running off. We also see damage from animal waste, and this is oftentimes associated with water quality, just like I discussed. So here are some pictures. I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes just to think to yourself. And what I want you to do is look at these images and relate it to what I just listed out, and tell me how these could be problematic or cause a sort of cost to the environment. I would consider many of these to be non-sustainable in various ways.
I don't know if it's just my screen, but I still only see cow pictures.
Is that the same for everyone? Is anyone else having that problem? Do you all see cows standing in poop or in water? Do you all exist on this Monday?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Jade, that might just be you. All right, we're gonna go one at a time. Look at these pictures. So, Grayson, since you're alive, what do you see here? What's kind of problematic in this photo? Grayson, can you hear me?
Yeah, was I muted?
Yes, you were.
Okay. Yeah, the thing that I see is they're just kind of all staying in their own poop. And that seems like it would be problematic because it can lead to infection and stuff.
Yeah, so that's definitely problematic for the animals themselves. How can this be problematic to the environment around them?
Well, I mean, doesn't look like there's any, well, I mean, it does give off like nitrogen and other stuff. So that can be bad, right?
Yeah, so the runoff from the concentrated feces.
Runoff, yeah.
And waste. Good. Next. Thank you, Grayson. Let's see. Simon. You know what could be problematic here?
So I guess like, is that like just like a dried out field, or is that like deforestation?
It's meant to be more of a deforestation kind of loss of habitat.
Yeah. Okay. So like, yeah, or like native species there would like lose their habitat.
Exactly. And that, so what they've done, though for agriculture, these can kind of help as windbreaks and help, in terms of increasing productivity for the operation. It's not the most sustainable for the farms or for the native species. And what you can see too is that they have field interspace with small bits of forests or trees, natural environment. There are a lot of species that won't cross that open field. And so they become isolated in these little patches and they just won't survive. They'll end up dying.
I need to go potty.
All right. See, Brock. I guess I'm picking on all males right now. So TR, you'll be next. Or LeVar, I don't know. Brock, what could be happening here? Oh.
Well, it says overgrazing, so like not loss of soil health, so like not enough nutrients in the soil for the plants to grow the right way, or
Yes, and that is definitely one, the loss of soil health, because they're damaging or over damaging the plants, right? What else can happen? And not so much, if you're overgrazing and the plants are dying off and say the animals are trampling this area quite a lot, what else could be happening? Anyone? This might be more for someone who knows more about cattle or sheep or livestock in general.
My thought would be that since the roots aren't holding the soil together, it's more likely there's going to be like slides and everything, like shifting of the terrain.
Yeah, so like the erosion. So overgrazing can increase erosion in an area because, again, this is kind of showing the root systems that's not able to better hold the soil in place and together. There's one more thing I would think about when looking at this, and you kind of have to extrapolate, but you can think about the fact that there may be a lot of compaction in this area because the soil is less healthy, there's no roots, much less aeration, so the soil is going to be ran off and or compacted. All right, finally, let's go LeVar. What's happening here?
would that be like damage from animal waste?
Yes, that's what I would, one of the main ones is these cows are in the water, right? So they're damaging or they're polluting the water sources, the natural waterways. Good. TR, what else? There's another major one here.
Looks like you have some erosion.
Yes, perfect. There's a lot of erosion going on here because they are in this waterway. They're in the water coming and going. They're knocking off a lot of the soil and the soil is becoming eroded. Great. Perfect, guys. We're going to move on then. In addition to these environmental costs, we have social costs associated with these agricultural systems. We see a decline in rural areas, and this is oftentimes seen with this loss of the family farm. In the early first couple of weeks of the class, we were talking about this shift in the industry here in the US, especially from the smaller farms, the subsistence type farming that we'd have seen 100 years ago, where we farm for our families, to these modernized farms. Less and less people in the population are involved in farming. Well, there are social costs associated with this switch in the types of system. We also see when we have corporate farms that move into an area, they will exploit community members for minimum wage jobs. And in turn, the profitability of the company is actually sent out of these communities where the work is being done, and to basically because it's a corporation. And so the communities are not benefiting from the work, and it's very unsustainable in terms of the economy, the local economies in the area. The community structures itself will change as the farming operations change, and that's associated with all of these concepts of lifestyle. And then oftentimes what we see and discuss, especially at Berea, is the reduced human satisfaction with agriculture in general because of some of the practices that can occur and some of the negative effects that it has on both the product as well as the communities. All right, so sustainable agriculture itself is agriculture that meets the need of the present without jeopardizing the ability of the future to meet their own needs. So we also want to do this without limiting the choices of future generations. But one distinction I want to make is that sustainable agriculture does not equal organic agriculture, right? Organic agriculture is actually a certification, a label. Producers have to basically go through a rigorous checklist, but also meet rigorous production practices to be able to be considered organic. Sustainable, on the other hand, is this idea of trying to, meet this goal of meeting the current needs without affecting the future's ability to meet their needs. There is no certification. And so this is one thing I want to caution you guys about when you're looking at products and things in the market, is things can be marketed as sustainability, but as sustainable, but that's not regulated by anything. So people can throw sustainable on a product just as a marketing ploy. But also sustainable itself is not got one simple definition. And it's oftentimes gauged kind of on a continuous, let's say a number line, or like a balance. So one side can be unsustainable completely, other side sustainable, and most farms are going to fall in between, similarly to what we talked about with the intensive versus extensive systems. In sustainability, we have what is called the triple bottom line. And this is 3 criteria that agriculture practices should attain to be considered sustainable. Right, so we have ecological soundness, and this is where we talk about the environment. We talk about the effects that detrimental practices can have, or the effects or positive ways that you can influence the environment around. And talk about the economic viability. So this is associated both with the enterprise or the farm itself, but also with the community and with the economic sustainability of the area in which the agriculture, the products are being produced. And then we talk about social, and this is again with the community and all the interrelationships that can occur. When we think about successful sustainable systems, we typically see an interplay between plants, animals, and humans of the system rather than one specialized system focusing solely on, say, dairy or solely on beef or solely on poultry production in high quantities. Right, so these are some of the principles. I'm not going to read them directly, but I'm going to briefly talk through them. Basically, we should select species that are well suited for the environment and diversify the livestock with the crops to be able to enhance the biological systems around the farm. Manage soil and water, protect it as well as enhance it. Manage waste and byproducts. Manage pests with products or practices that are minimally intrusive to the environment. You don't want to use, dump a lot of carcinogens on food crops and hope that those products turn out safe or all right for your production as well as the environment and the people around. Make sure you protect wildlife and habitats. Use less petroleum-based products, rely more on renewable energy sources. Use inputs efficiently. Restore farm economic profitability. Consider goals, lifestyle choices. Make sure you work on building a community, not just the enterprise itself, and always keep social equity in mind. Right, so as we go through some of the different physical practices we can do in terms of a sustainable farm, I believe we have 12 of these, so we're going to walk through them one at a time, and these are all presented from your book. First, rotate crops. We've talked about, or hopefully those of you at least upperclassmen have talked about this in other courses, where one year you may plant a crop, the next year you don't, you plant something differently in that place. The one here provided is alternating strips of alfalfa with corn. And this is done in an attempt to reduce weeds, diseases, and insect pests. The next one, you can use intensive grazing or rotational systems. Right, and here intensive is not referring to intensive like we think of in the production system itself, but intensive meaning it's an intense kind of grazing management. There's a lot of work going into it, right? So on the left, this is a small chicken tractor for a small production system, or say even a backyard farm. This is movable, or you can rotate it from place to place. On the right, what we see is an example of this intensive grazing system. And so the producers have come out and lined these fields. They've marked them off. So where you see lines, these are basically going to be either permanent or temporary fences, right? And day one, the animals will have access here to graze. Day two, they access here. Day three, they access here. And each day they're being rotated from field. And so they're given just the perfect amount of pasture that they need to graze. Calculations are done based on the amount of dry matter in the forage, as well as the dry matter intake in the animals and other nutrient needs. And then they're only given that much to graze. And so it's kind of precise. They come in and graze the grass down. Normally this is done to about 2 to 4 inches, depending on the goals of what you need to do. And then they're moved to the next field and then moved to the next field over and over. And by the time they get back around to this field, it will be stocked again with the grass that is needed. This is just a quick video. We don't need, well, it might be. It's a video of a drone. It's just showing you some of the practices. We're not going to watch all 10 minutes, do not worry. But when we look at this, you can see he's coming with a temporary fence or a break fence and marked off this pasture. And you can see the producer over here, he's coming and he's moving these sheep. So they've gone down and intensively grazed this area, this wooded area, and now he's going to move them into the new pasture. I'm just going to take a minute, let you guys see the animals moving through the field. A lot of times the animals in the system already know what they're doing. You don't really have to run them or work too hard to get them to move from pasture to pasture because they're ready to eat as soon as you go out there and feed them. All right, moving on. Next thing you can do is use this integrated pest management system. And this here is something we see quite often. We'll have poultry grazing or free range around food plants, kind of like an aviary. Sometimes we'll create it more specifically like an aviary, completely enclosed. But what these chickens do is they actually eat the pests and then they'll scratch around and help both fertilize the soil as well as increase soil health. Another one, what we can do is increase mechanical and biological weed control rather than using these chemicals and going out and dumping them on the soil, right? We can also use animal and green manures, and this replaces those chemical fertilizers like I had talked about. So this is composting, often done. This is, I call it a poop spreader. Basically all it does is you take animal waste. A lot of times on a dairy farm, you'll get waste built up in what we call a lagoon or a slurry pond. And they'll take the dry components of that, they'll separate it from the wet, take the dry components and spread it back on the field for fertilizer. And then on the right side, we have what's called a green manure. Basically, it's using plants to fix nitrogen back into the soil. All right. Next, we can use swine to scavenge behind ruminants, right? These swine, they're not necessarily there to eat the forages, rather they're there to kind of till up the soil, root around, then fertilize the soil, but it also is a way to integrate having multiple animals in your production system. We can use ruminants to manage small grain crops through the winter. It's basically straightforward. You can also utilize food processing waste. We've talked about this before in Kentucky with the dried distillers grains being very common in the feed stuff. This is orange pulp or citrus pulp on the right. This is commonly put into dairy cattle, especially in states like Florida and California, where there's a lot of dairy or citrus pulp. And then this is just waste from the food industry. Obviously pretzels, crackers, wafers. We can use mixed ruminant grazing to graze the stockpiled forages or wild growth. This is more in a tropical area, this picture on the left, but they're coming in and grazing the wild growth of the land. The right side, you can see goats, which we've established that will eat basically anything. They're eating some of the weeds and the overgrowth in the area. And what this producer has done is just come in with what the break fence or that removable fence, put them in the area in which he wanted them to graze down, and then just is letting them eat that. Next, we can use what we call riparian buffer strips, like LeVar was talking about the animals in the water. This is done to keep animals away from water, but also to protect the quality and the habitat of those around the water. Now, granted, the habitat could be, protected better than what this picture is showing, but this is simply showing the buffer strip. So the stream runs right down the middle of this, and then we have vegetation that's left to grow naturally on the outsides. So it reduces that soil erosion and protects the water from wastes. It also is going to help, say, if you were going to come out and spread manure, or even if you spread your fertilizer on the field and there's a heavy rain and goes to runoff, this vegetation is going to help catch some of that before it actually makes it into the waterway. Another thing we want to do is use species and varieties that are suited for the environment. We talked about this when we spoke about production systems and production systems around the world in the different climates. You want to make sure that the species you're using, if you're in a dry area, is well adapt to living and thriving in that environment, rather being something that needs a strictly temperate or a certain type of environment in general. Next, you can practice agroforestry. On the left, this is swine grazing. I don't remember which trees this is, but basically swine are grazing in a system that's also producing some sort of food crop. On the right side, this is the same concept as before with the poultry in the garden or that aviary, but this is being done under cultivated trees. How many, let's see. I'm trying to see your faces. Just 1 second. All right. Quickly raise your hand. How many of you all are familiar with or have been to the Berea College Farm? One. Okay, not many of you all. We're going to skip this activity then and keep going. Right. So then there's this other concept about a monoculture. A monoculture is a farm that raises a single crop or a single animal species. It's generally thought that there's no place for a monoculture in sustainable agriculture. And this is because they are heavily dependent on grain, and they end up decreasing biodiversity in these areas and negatively affecting the environment. On the top right, this is a finishing beef operation. You can see the paddocks that have these beef cows to be finished out. The sad part is there's very little greenery. There would be a lot of compaction in this area. There's going to be a lot of runoff from the waste. They have these slurry ponds, but these slurry ponds, given the state of the farm, I wouldn't imagine that they would be managed properly to reduce the runoff of the nitrogen and phosphorus or any other toxic chemicals from getting into the local waterways. On the bottom, this is an intensive dairy farm. And again, it is just another example of a monoculture where they're extremely specialized to do this. So final thoughts before we move on to our last little bit of activity is that when we think about sustainability and approaching a sustainable system, again, it's not sustainable or not. There's no black or white. And so if we want to take operation and get from being wherever the starting place is at and more sustainable, it's going to take small steps and it has to be realistic. And that's the case too if we as ambassadors in the industry are trying to improve the sustainability of the industry overall, whether it be in Kentucky, the United States, or across the world. It's small steps. We're not going to easily go out and change it. So keep that in mind as you start, if you go on to have your own operation or you work in the industry, that it takes a little bit and it's going to take some time. When we're quite far away from where I at least think we should be in terms of sustainability. And I've alluded to it previously, but even the conventional farms, even some of the monocultures can implement some approaches to help improve their sustainability. Because again, it's not black or white. There's no yes, sustainable, not sustainable. So we're going to do two things now. They're two videos. First, we are going to watch this video, and I want you to pay attention to and make a list of the sustainable practices that you see. I'll have you report out at the end. This is going to be, this is a farm that is meant to be very sustainable, and you should be able to come up with a pretty good list of practices that they employ.
I don't know about everybody else, but I can't hear it.
You said no sound, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if it's just my computer, but I couldn't hear the video.
I probably didn't hit the button. All right, restart.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I couldn't hear it either. I just thought
Perfect.
that's what you were meant to do.
Oh, no, sorry. Thank you. Thanks for speaking up.
You are at Fickle Creek Farm in Efland, North Carolina, which is in Orange County, right in the center of the Piedmont region of North Carolina. And we describe Fickle Creek Farm as a small-scale, diversified, sustainable farm. This farm right here is 61 acres. That's kind of the size of it. The sustainability part comes in with our practices. We are trying to produce food at the same time that we protect the environment and bring in minimal inputs from the outside. And that's always a challenge. The produce we grow is completely by organic standards and practices. However, we've chosen to not get certified because sometimes what I call technically organic but not sustainable option just doesn't make sense. We've decided to use locally milled feed, for example. The reason for that is to get the certified organic feed that we had available at the time. It came from a much longer distance. We sell retail direct. We do very little wholesale. So it's not like our product is on a shelf somewhere and the only thing the consumer has to go by is the stamp on it that says certified organic. We're very lucky in that we have a customer base that really supports us. They come out to the markets in rain or shine. They appreciate what we're doing and how we're doing it. But that helps financially, of course, but that also gets us into kind of communally sustainable. The farmer and the farm workers have to make a living along the way too. So it has to be sustainable for the farmer first. This farm is what I would call a agroforestry system. A definition for agroforestry: the inclusion of a woody perennial component in a farming system meant to produce livestock and or produce. So our trees, just like our livestock, we look at in two ways. They have service benefits and they have product benefits. So examples that we get from the trees are shade, improved aesthetics, erosion control. The trees are doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily monetary income, but they are important services to be sustainable and to be an enjoyable place to farm. We heat our home with firewood, and so firewood is an actual product. So there are products as well from the trees. By having not only our crops and our pastures, but then completely natural forested areas, our biodiversity is much, much higher than most agricultural systems. The livestock that we have brought to the farm and that we have now all got here because we were trying to meet a need of the farm's sustainability. Chickens, for example, we started with laying hens, and yes, we needed the income, but we also needed the fertilizer that they were producing. And so not only did they produce the fertilizer, but they spread it and incorporated it for us. The chickens are really good for insect control as well, and weed seed control. All of those are, again, our services first. Then I think we got pigs next. Their service at the very outset was to eradicate noxious weeds that we couldn't get rid of any other way, because of course we don't use herbicides. And then we found out just serendipitously that they're also great for raising rocks from pastures, and they bring them to the surface, and then we can just go out and collect them much more readily. They are great for understory clearing. So we'll take a managed small woodlot area and we'll put pigs in it, and they'll clear it, the understory for us, so then we can get in to do the thinning that we want to do. Now what we do as part of our standard procedure is to clear a paddock that has produce in it with sheep. So they eat all the vegetation, the remnants of a crop. Then we bring in chickens typically, and they eat down even further, and they eat weed seeds and scratch. And then finally we bring in the ducks, and they just go right down the rows, just like kind of shoveling along with their beaks, and the slugs are gone. So, and of course, again, they produce eggs, so they're paying for themselves. We're at the very top of Cane Creek watershed, which is the water for Carborough and Chapel Hill. This farm is a farm conservation easement, and that means we sold our development rights. So there will never be development on this property beyond what is here now. You've probably heard many times farming is really hard work, and it is. I do feel like we're just one of many farms in this area that are farming along these lines, and we do make a significant impact.
How would you like to help local businesses and get compensated very well?
All right, hey guys, sorry, I was a little slow there. We are going to, does anyone want to call out or talk first about the sustainable practices? We're going to try and come up with at least 8. I honestly have never counted, so we're going to see how far we can go. Michaela or Julie, either one.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know if it was, but I was gonna talk about how they use the trees for service and product benefit. They use it to like erosion control as well as using it for shade, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's one. Perfect. So the forestry, I'm gonna put it over here. All right, Michaela, what do you have?
I have a couple. chickens for fertilizer and weed and pest control, and then swine as weed control.
Perfect. All right. Was it Cyan? Somebody else.
Yeah, I was about to talk about the chickens that they were talking about using for fertilizer as well.
But how else are those chickens contributing besides the fertilizer and pests?
Didn't they say? I know there was like 3 or 4 that they said they fertilizer and that they spread it. It wasn't like weeds or anything, was it?
No. Think about, well, where I was going at least, think about the market. And this could be the same for any of them. But how is that a sustainable practice?
Was it the eggs that they produce?
Yeah, so the eggs are sold locally. Perfect. So chickens and ducks, because he said it for the ducks too. All right, next. Who else has something? Jade.
I thought
And
it
then
was cool
Alexa.
I thought it was cool how they cleared the paddock with produce in it with the sheep.
What?
I do. I like that practice too. They ran the sheep, and then chicken. Yeah, sheep, chickens, and then the ducks. And then prepared it for the produce. All right, anything else?
Didn't they use like locally milled feed?
Yes, locally sourced food, good. And which is very important because it reduces, he was talking about the difference in terms of the organic versus not. And the organic, because it has to travel farther, it could be seen as less sustainable because it's using more petroleum for shipping. It is being produced at another location. So the economic side of it, the money is not staying in the community, it's being sent outward. All right, what else?
Mine's 5. And the other one 2. Pick up rocks in their pasture.
Yes, they use swine for mechanical labor, which I like because I don't know if y'all have ever lifted and just carried rocks, but it's awful. I think I know there's at least one more we can talk about. Sorry, she's doing math. There's one more. What? And it's not. I mean, I'm sure there's more, but it's not associated with the animals themselves necessarily. Julie, what is it?
My mic was on, I didn't even notice. My bad.
Wasn't it like there's no more production allowed on the land?
That is a good one. Yes, that's not what I was thinking of, but that is a good one. What about the market? Where are they selling their products? And we talked about it with the chickens, but how does that contribute to sustainability? There's 2 major ways.
They sell it at farmers markets, so they go straight to their customer base.
Yes. And so, sorry, what were you saying?
I was gonna say they don't do retailers, like won't like stores, so it provides to the community.
Yes, so locally. So just play. All right, and then if it's sold locally, there's social sustainability, and then we have the economy being local, so stimulating local economy. All right, perfect. I think that's at least 8. All right, perfect. There's one more thing, one more quick video I'm gonna have you guys watch, and then we'll be done for today. LeVar, if you need to head out, I completely understand. It is a shorter video about a farm. It is less less sustainable in terms of being compared to the one we just saw. But what I want you to do is try to pick out 2 things that they do that is sustainable and 2 things that you would recommend to improve sustainability on this farm.
We're in Brewston Mills, West Virginia. We are just south of the Pennsylvania line and just west of the Maryland line, the little 90-degree corner of West Virginia between the panhandles. That's us. My parents started the dairy in the early 50s. I'm second generation dairy farmer, 5th generation on the farm. So we've been on this ground a long time. We've always had a strong conservation history and practices. We're on a hill, we do have drainage, we have a stream down there. So we keep a buffer strip of grass or vegetation along that stream to make sure we don't have anything going in there. We don't use a lot of chemical fertilizer. We are able to utilize our liquid manure. We use crop rotation, so that cuts down on the amount of commercial fertilizer, because if we plow down an alfalfa plant, it releases nitrogen to help grow the corn. As far as cow comfort goes, you do a lot of listening to your cows. My cows, they grew up going out. They'll be out in the morning and they'll graze and they enjoy that. But then as it starts to get warmer, they like to go in the barn. Grazing creates some nutrition challenges because you don't know exactly what they're eating out here. We're supplying fresh feed, fresh water, and if I have them in the barn, I can control more what the weather, kind of impact the weather has on them. It's more climate controlled. They've got fans, they've got misters, keeps them cool, they have plenty of feed. Vaccination programs are a big thing. You know, our vet's here every 2 weeks checking the cows, and then he's on call anytime we need him. We have a hoof trimmer come in, a professional that takes care of their feet, makes sure we're doing preventive care to their feet so we don't start having issues and have lame cows. Do a lot of observation and to try to see, make sure they're comfortable, and try to find any areas if you do have a weakness that you need to improve. I went to West Virginia University, did 4 years there, got my degree.
All right, and we're back. So we didn't talk, Brock didn't talk last time. Brock, what did you notice was sustainable on that farm?
The water sources and how they, I honestly, isn't it something with the water sources, how they used it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. But that's okay. Emily, can you help him out?
The buffer strips to keep the waste out of the water, the
Yes.
stream.
If that's what you're referring to, Brock, then yes. Perfect. Alexis, did you catch another more sustainable practice?
They did crop rotations.
They did crop rotations. Good. Anything else you guys catch?
They try to not use tons of like chemical fertilizers. Instead, they would use the manure.
Yes, they would. Perfect. And those are the main ones he did discuss. All right. TR, did you think of anything that you would suggest in terms of improving sustainability on his farm?
I would add like maybe some aviaries for pest control or something to that effect.
Yeah, so adding another species of some sort, even if it just complements what's being done there. Yes, that would work. Let's see. I don't know who to call. Michaela.
I would do. They already did the buffer strips. I would do something with the cows that are grazing. I think it said they. Did it say they switched pastures? I don't.
He didn't talk about it, but yeah, that's something I would suggest as in more intensively grazing, more targeted, correct? And Trinity, do you have anything else to add?
I don't know, like I feel like he kept it pretty clean, but there was at times like in the videos, like some of the like spots they were standing in looked like a little more dirty. So maybe just making sure to keep everything a little more clean at times.
Yeah, to help with some of the managing the waste.
Yeah.
Perfect. I would have said something about that as well. All right, good job, guys. Do you have any comments or concerns before I let you go? All right, by the end of the day, your module will be up. Like I said, it is relatively short. The last 2 modules are relatively short because you have other things to focus on as well. And with that, I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow at noon. Email me if you need anything. I was out of town this weekend, so I'll be getting back to everybody that reached out. All right. Goodbye.
I had a question. The